A man runs over 20 miles, delivers his message, and drops dead on the spot. And somehow we decided to commemorate that by making millions of people repeat the experience every year. Today, we are tracing the word marathon back to a Greek battlefield, a field of fennel, and one very unfortunate messenger. To understand the word marathon, you have to go back to ancient Greece, specifically to a region called Attica, which is the peninsula that juts out from the Greek mainland and contains Athens at its center. In 490 BC, the Persian Empire, then the largest empire the world had ever seen, sent a military force across the Aegean Sea to punish the Greeks for supporting a rebellion. The Persians landed on the northeastern coast of Attica, on a flat coastal plain ideally suited for their cavalry. That plain was called Marathon. The name itself is Greek, and it almost certainly comes from the word for fennel, the herb. The area was probably thick with wild fennel plants, and so the Greeks simply called it fennel-field. It is the kind of deeply practical naming that ancient peoples were very good at. No grand mythology, no founding hero. Just, there's a lot of fennel here, so that is what we are calling it. That unremarkable field of herbs was about to become one of the most famous place names in Western history. The Battle of Marathon in 490 BC was a genuinely stunning military upset. The Athenian army, outnumbered and without cavalry, faced a Persian force that had already swept through much of the Greek world. And yet, the Athenians won. Decisively. Ancient sources suggest the Persians lost around 6,400 men, while the Athenians lost fewer than 200. The victory was so significant that for generations afterward, Athenian men would say they were fighters at Marathon, as the highest possible claim to honor. The historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, gave us the most detailed account of the battle, and it is from his work that later writers began piecing together the stories attached to this place. Now, here is where it gets complicated, because the story that most people know is actually a blend of two different stories that got fused together over centuries. Herodotus tells us that before the battle, the Athenians sent a professional runner named Pheidippides from Athens to Sparta, a distance of about 150 miles, to ask for Spartan military help. That is the real Pheidippides run in the ancient sources. Athens to Sparta, 150 miles, accomplished in roughly 2 days. Pheidippides makes it, delivers his message, and the Spartans say they want to help but are currently in the middle of a religious festival and cannot march until the moon is full. Pheidippides runs back. The Athenians fight without Spartan help and win anyway. That is Herodotus. That is the documented story. The other story, the one about a messenger running from the battlefield at Marathon back to Athens to announce the victory, and then collapsing and dying, appears much later. The Roman-era writer Plutarch, writing roughly 600 years after the battle, mentions a runner named either Thursippus or Eucles making this run. The writer Lucian, also from the Roman period, is where we get the famous dying words, "We have won," before the runner collapses. But none of these writers agree on the runner's name, the details, or even whether it happened exactly this way. So we have a real runner, Pheidippides, who ran a genuinely extraordinary distance, and we have a legendary story about a different run attached to a different runner whose name nobody could quite agree on. By the time the modern world latched onto the marathon story, these two narratives had already merged into one. The modern word marathon, as we use it now, dates to 1896. That was the year of the first modern Olympic Games held in Athens. A French scholar named Michel Brial had proposed to his friend Pierre de Coubertin, the founder of the modern Olympics, that the Games should include a long-distance race commemorating the run from Marathon to Athens. The route would roughly follow the path a legendary messenger might have taken. The race was run on April 10, 1896, and it was won by a Greek water carrier named Spiridon Lewis, who covered the approximately 25-mile course in just under 3 hours. Louis became a national hero in Greece almost overnight. The word marathon, to mean a long-distance foot race, enters the written record from this 1896 event. The earliest written record of the word in its modern English sense is dated to 1828, which predates the race, though in that early context it was being used more loosely, likely in reference to the ancient legend rather than a specific athletic event. Here is the misconception that almost everyone carries around. Ask anyone why we call it a marathon, and they will tell you. A Greek soldier ran from Marathon to Athens to deliver news of the victory, said, "We have won," and died. That story is mostly a later invention. As we covered, Herodotus, our earliest and most reliable source, never describes this particular run. The run he describes for Pheidippides goes from Athens to Sparta and back, which is a completely different route and more than 10 times the distance. The death of the finish story was likely constructed by later Greek and Roman writers who wanted a more dramatic narrative around the battle. It is compelling, it is memorable, and it completely eclipsed the more complicated and arguably more impressive true story. The irony is that the run Pheidippides actually did, 50 miles to Sparta in 2 days, is far more grueling than any modern marathon. There's actually an ultramarathon today called the Spartathlon that retraces that route. Runners have 36 hours to complete it. It is considered one of the most brutal endurance races in the world. So, the real Pheidippides story is even more extreme than the legend. We just forgot it. The word marathon jumped out of athletics almost immediately and became one of the most productive metaphorical words in modern English. By the early 20th century, people were already using it to describe any prolonged, exhausting activity. Today, we have marathon sessions in government where legislators debate through the night. We have movie marathons and TV marathons, which streaming services have essentially industrialized. When a negotiation runs for 18 straight hours, journalists reach for this word automatically. The distance itself was not even standardized until 1921. The 26 miles and 385 yards we use today was fixed partly by accident. At the 1908 London Olympics, the race was extended so it could start at Windsor Castle and finish in front of the Royal Box at the Olympic Stadium. That specific quirky distance eventually became the official standard. The word sits in an interesting etymological position because its linguistic roots are genuinely unclear. The Greek marathon almost certainly connects to the Greek word for fennel, marathos, but how that root connects to older Indo-European languages is not firmly established. Fennel was significant in ancient Greek culture, used medicinally and symbolically, and several place names across the Greek world reference it. What is remarkable is the chain of transformation this word underwent. A herb gives its name to a coastal plain. A battle on that plain becomes legendary. A race commemorating that battle enters the Olympics, and then the name of that race becomes a universal metaphor for any prolonged human effort. The word marathon also gave us the place name that survives in modern Greece to this day. The town is still called Marathon. There's a museum there dedicated to the battle. The burial mound of the Athenian dead, the Soros, is still visible in the landscape. The broader family of marathon in English sits alongside other words we borrowed from ancient Greek battles and places. Spartan, to mean austere and disciplined. Olympian,